Graphic audio. A movie in your mind.
I am not a good person. Oh, I know what the stories say about me. They call me Oculator Dramatis, hero, savior of the 17 kingdoms. Those, however, are just rumors. Some are exaggerations, many are outright lies. The truth is far less impressive. When Mr. Bagsworth first came to me, suggesting that I write my autobiography, I was hesitant. However, I soon realized that this was the perfect opportunity to explain myself to the public. As I understand it, this book will be published simultaneously in the Free Kingdoms and Inner Libraria. This presents something of a problem for me since I will have to make the story understandable to people from both areas. Those in the Free Kingdoms might be unfamiliar with things like bazookas, briefcases, and guns. However, those in Libraria, or the Hushlands as they are often called, will likely be unfamiliar with things like oculators, Kristen, and the depth of the librarian conspiracy. To those of you in the Free Kingdoms, I suggest that you find a reference book. There are many that would do, to explain unfamiliar terms to you. After all, this book will be published as a biography in your lands, and so it's not my purpose to teach you about the strange machines and archaic weaponry of Libraria. My purpose is to show you the truth about me, and to prove that I am not the hero that everyone says I am. In the Hushlands, those librarian-controlled nations such as the United States, Canada, and England, this book will be published as a work of fantasy. Do not be fooled. This is no work of fiction, nor is my name really Brandon Sanderson. Both are guises to hide the book from librarian agents. Unfortunately, even with these precautions, I suspect that the librarians will discover the book and ban it. In that case, our Free Kingdom agents will have to sneak into libraries and bookstores to put it on shelves. Count yourself lucky if you've found one of these secret copies. For you Hushlanders, I know the events of my life may seem wondrous and mysterious, and I will do my best to explain them. But please remember that my purpose is not to entertain you. My purpose is to open your eyes to the truth. I know that in writing this, I shall make few friends in either world. People are never pleased when you reveal that their beliefs are wrong. But that is what I must do. This is my story. The story of a selfish, contemptible fool. The story of a coward.
Graphic Audio presents Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians by Brandon Sanderson. Narrated by Alejandro Ruiz. With performances by Chris Genebach, Carolyn Kashner, Zeke Alton, Marnie Penning, Bradley Smith, Richard Rowan, Peter Holdway, David Jordan, Colleen Delaney, James Lewis, Michael John Casey, Scott McCormick, Chris Stinson, Ken Jackson, Sasha Olinik, and Terrence Aselford. Alcatraz versus the Evil Librarians, Book 1.
So there I was, tied to an altar made from outdated encyclopedias, about to get sacrificed to the dark powers by a cult of evil librarians. As you might imagine, that sort of situation can be quite disturbing. It does funny things to the brain to be in such danger. In fact, it often makes a person pause and reflect upon his life. If you've never faced such a situation, then you'll simply have to take my word. If, on the other hand, you have faced such a situation, then you are probably dead and aren't likely to be listening to this. In my case, the moment of impending death made me think about my parents. It was an odd thought, since I hadn't grown up with them. In fact, until my 13th birthday, I really only knew one thing about my parents: that they had a twisted sense of humor. Why do I say this? Well, you see, my parents named me Al. In most cases, this would be short for Albert, which is a fine name. In fact, you've probably known an Albert or two in your lifetime, and chances are they were decent fellows. If they weren't, then it certainly wasn't the name's fault. My name isn't Albert. Al could also be short for Alexander. I wouldn't have minded this either, since Alexander's a great name. It sounds kind of regal. My name isn't Alexander. I'm certain that you can think of other names Al might be short for. Alfonso has a pleasant ring to it. Alan would also be acceptable, as would have been Alfred, though I really don't have an inclination toward butlery. My name is not Alfonso, Alan, or Alfred, nor is it Alejandro, Alton, Aldris, or Alonzo. My name is Alcatraz. Alcatraz Smedry. Now, some of you Free Kingdomers might be impressed by my name. That's wonderful for you. But I grew up in the Hushlands, in the United States. I didn't know about oculators or the like, though I did know about prisons. And that was why I figured that my parents must have had a twisted sense of humor. Why else would they name their child after the most infamous prison in U.S. history? On my 13th birthday, I received a second confirmation that my parents were indeed cruel people. That was the day when I unexpectedly received in the mail the only inheritance they left me.
There you are.
It was a bag of sand. I stood at the door, looking down at the package in my hands, frowning as the postman drove away. The package looked old. Its string ties were frayed, and its brown paper packaging was worn and faded. Inside the package, I found a box containing a simple note.
Alcatraz, happy 13th birthday. Here's your inheritance, as promised. Love, Mom and Dad. What?
Underneath the note, I found the bag of sand. It was small, perhaps the size of a fist, and was filled with ordinary brown beach sand. Now, my first inclination was to think that the package was a joke. You probably would have thought the same. One thing, however, made me pause. I set the box down, then smoothed out its wrinkled packaging paper. One edge of the paper was covered with wild scribbles, a little like those made by a person trying to get the ink in a pen to flow. On the front, there was writing. It looked old and faded, almost illegible in places. And yet, it accurately spelled out my address. An address I'd been living at for only 8 months.
Impossible.
Then I went inside my house and set the kitchen on fire. Now, I warned you that I wasn't a good person. Those who knew me when I was young would never have believed that one day I would be known as a hero. The word heroic just didn't apply to me. Nor did people use words like nice or even friendly to describe me. They might have used the word clever, though I suspect that devious might have been more correct. Destructive was another common one I heard, but I didn't care for it. It wasn't actually all that accurate. No, people never did say good things about me. Good people don't burn down kitchens. Still holding the strange package, I wandered toward my foster parents' kitchen, lost in thought. It was a very nice kitchen. Modern-looking with white wallpaper and lots of shiny chrome appliances. Anyone entering would immediately notice that this was the kitchen of a person who took pride in their cooking skills. I set my package on the table, then moved over to the kitchen stove. If you're a Hushlander, you would have thought I looked like a fairly normal American boy, dressed in loose jeans and a t-shirt. I've been told I was a handsome kid. Some even said I had an innocent face. I was not too tall, had dark brown hair, and was skilled at breaking things. Quite skilled. When I was very young, other kids called me a klutz. I was always breaking things. Plates, cameras, chickens. It seemed inevitable that whatever I picked up, I would end up dropping, cracking, or otherwise mixing up. Not exactly the most inspiring talent a young man ever had, I know. However, I generally tried to do my best despite it. Just like I did this day. Still thinking about the strange package, I filled a pot with water. Next, I got out a few packs of instant ramen noodles. I set them down, looking at the stove. It was a fancy gas one with real flames. My foster mother, Joan, wouldn't settle for electric. Sometimes it was daunting, Knowing how easily I could break things, this one simple curse seemed to dominate my entire life. Perhaps I shouldn't have tried to fix dinner. Perhaps I should simply have retreated to my room. But what was I to do? Stay there all the time? Never go out because I was worried about the things I might break? Of course not. I reached out and turned on the gas burner.
Uh-oh.
And of course, the flames immediately flared up around the sides of the pan, far higher than should have been possible. I quickly tried to turn down the flames, but the knob broke off in my hand. I tried to grab the pot and take it off the stove, but of course, the handle broke off. I stared at the broken handle for a moment, then looked up at the flames. They flickered, catching the drapes on fire. The fire gleefully began to devour the cloth.
Well, so much for that.
I tossed the broken handle over my shoulder. I left the fire burning. Once again, I feel I must remind you I'm not a very nice person, and picked up my strange package as I walked out into the den. There, I pulled out the brown wrapper, flattening it against the table with one hand and looking at the stamps. One had a picture of a woman wearing flight goggles, with an old-fashioned airplane in the background behind her. All of the stamps looked old, perhaps as old as I was. I turned on the computer and checked a database of stamp issue dates, and found that I was right. They had been printed 13 years ago. Someone had taken quite a bit of effort to make it seem like my present had been packaged, addressed, and stamped over a decade earlier. That, however, was ridiculous. How would the sender have known where I'd been living? During the last 13 years, I'd gone through dozens of sets of foster parents. Besides, my experience has been that the number of stamps it takes to send a package increases without warning or pattern. The postage people are, I'm convinced, quite sadistic in that regard. There was no way someone could have known 13 years ago how much postage it would cost to send a package in my day. I shook my head, standing up and tossing the M key from the computer keyboard into the trash. I'd stopped trying to stick the keys back on. They always fell off again anyway. I got the fire extinguisher from the hall closet, then walked back into the kitchen, which was now quite thoroughly billowing with smoke. I put the box and extinguisher on the table, then picked up a broom, holding my breath as I calmly knocked the tattered remains of the drapes into the sink. I turned on the water, then finally used the extinguisher to blast the burning wallpaper and cabinets, also putting out the stove. The smoke alarm didn't go off. Of course. You see, I'd broken that previously. All I needed to do was rest my head against its case for a second, and it had fallen apart. I didn't open a window, but I did have the presence of mind to get a pair of pliers and twist the stove's gas valve off. Then I glanced at the curtains, a smoldering ashen lump in the sink.
Well, that's it. Joan and Roy will never continue to put up with me after this.
Perhaps you'd think I should have felt ashamed. But what was I supposed to do? Like I said, I couldn't hide in my room all the time. Was I to avoid living just because life was a little different for me than it was for ordinary people? No. I had learned to deal with my strange curse. I figured others would simply have to do so as well. Finally realizing that the kitchen was still rank with smoke, I opened the window and began using a towel to fan it out. Oh! My foster mother, Joan, rushed into the kitchen a moment later. She stood horrified looking at the fire damage. I tossed aside the towel and left without a word, going up to my room.
That boy is a disaster!
My foster parents were in the study down on the first floor, their favorite place for quiet conferences about me. Fortunately, one of the first things I'd broken in the house had been the study's window rollers, locking the windows permanently open so I could listen in.
Now, Joan.
I can't take it, Roy. He destroys everything he touches.
There was that word again. Destroy. I felt my hair bristle in annoyance.
I don't destroy things. I break them. They're still there when I'm finished, they just don't work right anymore.
He means well. He's a kind-hearted boy.
First the washing machine, then the lawnmower, then the upstairs bath, now the kitchen, all in less than a year.
He's had a hard life. He simply tries too hard. How would you feel? Being passed from family to family, never having a home?
Well, can you blame people for getting rid of him?
In the moment of silence, I imagined what was going on between my foster parents. Joan was probably giving Roy the look. Usually it was the husband who gave the look, insisting that I be sent away. Roy had always been the soft one here, however.
Come in.
I remained lying on my bed. It was still early evening. The sun hadn't even set yet.
Mrs. Sheldon, I came as soon as I heard about the accident.
Miss Fletcher, I'm sorry to...
No, you did well to last this long. I can arrange for the boy to be taken tomorrow.
I closed my eyes. Joan and Roy had lasted quite long. Longer, certainly, than any of my other recent sets of foster parents. 8 months was a valiant effort when taking care of me was concerned. I felt a little twist in my stomach.
Where is he now?
He's upstairs.
Miss Fletcher, you look lovely.
It was a stretch. Miss Fletcher, my personal caseworker, might have been a pretty woman had she not been wearing a pair of hideous horn-rimmed glasses. She perpetually kept her blonde hair up in a bun that was only slightly less tight than the dissatisfied line of her lips. She wore a simple white blouse and a black skirt that went to mid-calf. For her, it was a daring outfit. The shoes, after all, were maroon.
The kitchen, Alcatraz? Why the kitchen?
It was an accident. I was trying to do something nice for my foster parents.
You decided that you would be kind to Joan Sheldon, one of the city's finest and most well-renowned chefs, by burning down her kitchen?
Just wanted to fix dinner. I figured even I could mess up ramen noodles.
Finally, she walked into the room, shaking her head as she strolled past my dresser. She poked my inheritance package with her index finger. Then she eyed the crumpled paper and worn strings. Miss Fletcher had a thing about messiness. She turned back to me.
We're running out of families, Smedry. The other couples are hearing rumors. Soon there won't be any place left to send you.
I remained quiet, still lying down. Miss Fletcher folded her arms and tapped her index finger against one arm.
You realize, of course, that you are worthless.
Here we go.
This was my least favorite part of the process. I stared up at my ceiling.
You are fatherless and motherless, a parasite upon the system. You are a child who has been given a second, third, and now 27th chance. And how have you received this generosity? With indifference, disrespect, and destructiveness.
I don't destroy. I break. There's a difference.
Miss Fletcher left me then, walking out and pulling the door closed.
Good evening to you both. My assistant will arrive in the morning to take care of everything.
It's too bad. Roy and Joan really are good people. They would have made great parents.
Now, you're probably wondering about the beginning of the previous chapter, with its reference to evil librarians, altars made of encyclopedias, and its general feeling of, oh no, Alcatraz is going to be sacrificed. Now, before we get to this, let me explain something about myself. I've been many things in my life. Student, spy, sacrifice, potted plant. However, at this point, I'm something completely different from all of those. Something more frightening than any of them. I'm a writer. You may have noticed that I began my story with a quick, snappy scene of danger and tension, but then quickly moved on to a more boring discussion of my childhood. Well, that's because I wanted to prove something to you. That I am not a nice person. Would a nice person begin with such an exciting scene, then make you wait almost an entire book to listen to it? Would a nice person write a book that exposes the true nature of the world to all of you ignorant hushlanders, thereby forcing your lives into chaos? Would a nice person write a book that proves that Alcatraz Smedry, the Free Kingdom's greatest hero, was just a mean-spirited adolescent? Of course not. I awoke grumpily that next morning, annoyed by the fact that nobody else was answering the front door. I climbed out of bed, then threw on a bathrobe. Though the clock read 10 a.m., I was still tired. I'd stayed up late, lost in thought. Then Joan and Roy had tried to say goodbye. I hadn't opened my door to them. Better to get things over without all that gushing. No, I was not happy to be reawoken at 10 a.m. Or actually, any a.m. I walked downstairs and pulled open the door, prepared to meet whichever assistant Miss Fletcher had sent to retrieve me.
Alcatraz, my boy! Happy birthday!
Oh?
You shouldn't swear, my boy.
The man pushed his way into the house. He was an older man who was dressed in a sharp black tuxedo and wore a strange pair of red-tinted glasses. He was quite bald, save for a small bit of white hair running around the back of his head, and this puffed out in an unkempt fashion. He wore a similarly bushy white mustache, and he smiled quite broadly as he turned to me, his face wrinkled but his eyes alight with excitement.
Well, my boy, how does it feel to be 13?
Same as it did yesterday, when it was actually my birthday. Miss Fletcher must have told you the wrong date. I'm not packed yet. You're gonna have to wait.
I tiredly began to walk toward the stairs.
Wait, your birthday was yesterday?
I nodded. I'd never met the man before, but Miss Fletcher had several assistants. I didn't know them all.
Rumbling Rons! I'm late!
No. Actually, you're early. As I said, you'll need to wait.
The old man rushed up the stairs behind me. I turned, frowning.
You can wait downstairs.
Quickly, boy, I can't wait. Soon you'll be getting a package in the mail and—
Stop! You know about the package?
Of course I do. Don't tell me it already came.
I nodded.
Blistering Brooks! Well, lad, where is it?
Did Miss Fletcher send it?
Miss Fletcher. Never heard of her. Your parents sent that box, my boy.
He's never heard of her.
It was then that I realized that I'd never verified the man's identity.
Great. I've let a lunatic into the house.
Oh, blast.
The old man reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a pair of yellow-tinted glasses. He quickly exchanged the light red ones for these, then looked around.
There!
Hey!
He didn't stop, so I followed. The old man was surprisingly spry for his age, and he reached the door to my room in just a few heartbeats.
Is this your room, my boy? Lots of footprints leading here. What happened to the doorknob?
It fell off. My first night in the house.
How odd. Now, where's that box?
Look, you have to leave. If you don't, I'm gonna call the police.
The police? Why would you do that?
Because you're in my house. Well, my ex-house, at least.
But you let me in, lad.
Well, now I'm telling you to leave.
But why? Don't you recognize me, my boy?
Should I?
I'm your grandfather, lad. Grandpa Smedry. Leavenworth Smedry, oculator dramatis. Don't tell me you don't remember me. I was there when you were born.
I blinked, then frowned, then cocked my head to the side.
You were there?
Yes, 13 years ago. You haven't seen me since, of course.
And I'm supposed to remember you?
Well, certainly. We have excellent memories, we Smedrys. Now, about that box.
Grandfather? The man had to be lying, of course. I don't even have parents. Why would I have a grandfather? Now, looking back, I realized that this was a silly thought. Everybody has a grandfather. 2 of them, actually. Just because you haven't seen them doesn't mean they don't exist. In that way, grandfathers are kind of like kangaroos. At any rate, I most certainly should have called the police on this elderly intruder. He has been the main source of all my problems ever since. Unfortunately, I didn't throw him out. Instead, I just watched him put away his yellow-tinted spectacles, retrieving the reddish-tinted ones again. Then, he finally spotted the box on my dresser, scribbled on brown paper still sitting beside it. The old man rushed over eagerly.
Did he send it?
He reached into the box, taking out the note with an oddly reverent touch. He read it, smiling fondly, then looked up at me.
So, where is it?
Where's what?
The inheritance, lad.
In the box.
There isn't anything in here but the note.
What?
I walk over to see that, indeed, the box was empty. The bag of sand was gone.
What did you do with it?
With what?
The bag of sand.
So, it really came. There was an actual bag of sand in this box.
I nodded slowly.
What color was the sand, lad?
Sandy?
Galloping camels! I'm too late! They must have gotten here before me. Quickly, lad, who's been in this room since you received the box?
Nobody.
By this point, as you can imagine, I was growing a little frustrated and increasingly confused. Not to mention hungry and still a bit tired. And a little sore from gym class the previous week. But that isn't exactly all that relevant, is it?
Nobody? Nobody else has been in this room?
Nobody. Nobody at all. Except Miss Fletcher,
Who is this Miss Fletcher you keep mentioning, lad?
my caseworker.
What does she look like?
Glasses, snobbish face, usually has her hair in a bun.
The glasses. Did they have horn rims?
Usually.
Hyperventilating Hobbs! A librarian! Quickly, lad, we have to go. Get dressed. I'll go steal some food from your foster parents.
Wait!
I stood, dumbfounded.
Miss Fletcher? Take the inheritance? That's stupid. Why would she want a silly bag of sand?
I shook my head, uncertain what to make of all this. Finally, I just walked over to my dresser. Getting dressed, at least, seemed like a good idea. I threw on a pair of jeans, a t-shirt, and my favorite green jacket. As I finished, Grandpa Smedry rushed back into my bedroom, carrying 2 of Roy's extra briefcases. I noticed a leaf of lettuce sticking halfway out of one, while the other seemed to be leaking a bit of ketchup.
Here!
Grandpa Smedry handed me the lettuce briefcase.
I packed us lunches. No telling how long it will be before we can stop for food.
I raised the briefcase, frowning.
You packed lunches inside of briefcases?
They'll look less suspicious that way. We have to fit in! Now, let's get moving. The librarians could already be working on that sand.
So?
So? Lad, with those sands, the librarians could destroy kingdoms, overthrow cultures, dominate the world. We need to get them back. We'll have to strike quickly, and possibly at great peril to our lives. But that's the Smedry way.
I lowered the briefcase.
If you say so.
Before we leave, I need to know what our resources are. What's your talent, lad?
Talent?
Yes, every Smedry has a talent. What's yours?
Playing the oboe?
This is no time for jokes, lad. This is serious if we don't get that sand back.
Well, I'm pretty good at breaking things.
Grandpa Smedry froze.
Maybe I shouldn't play with the old man. He may be a loon, but that's no reason to make fun of him.
Breaking things? So it's true. Why such a talent hasn't been seen in centuries.
Look, I was just joking around. I didn't mean...
I knew it! Yes, yes! This improves our chances. Come, lad, we have to get moving.
Grandpa Smedry turned and left the room again, carrying his briefcase and rushing eagerly down the stairs.
Wait!
I chased after the old man. However, when I reached the doorway, I paused. There was a car parked on the curb outside. An old car. Now, when you hear the words old car, you likely think of a beat-up or rusted vehicle that barely runs. A car that is old, kind of in the same way that cassette tapes are old. This was not such a car. It was not old like cassette tapes are old. It wasn't even old like records are old. No, this car was old like Beethoven is old. Or at least, so it seemed. To me. And likely to most of you living in the Hushlands. The car looked like an antique. Kind of like a Model T. But that was just my assumption. The point is that many times, the first thing a person presumes about something or someone is inaccurate. Or at the very least, incomplete. Take the young Alcatraz Smedry, for instance. After listening to my story up to this point, you have probably made some assumptions. Perhaps you're, despite my best efforts, feeling a bit of sympathy for me. After all, orphans usually make very sympathetic heroes. Perhaps you think that my habit of using sarcasm is simply a method of hiding my insecurity. Perhaps you've decided that I wasn't a cruel boy, just a very confused one. Perhaps you've decided, despite my feigned indifference, I didn't like breaking things. Obviously, you are a person of very poor judgment. I would ask you to kindly refrain from drawing conclusions that I don't explicitly tell you to make. That's a very bad habit, and it makes authors grumpy. I was none of those things. I was simply a mean boy who didn't really care whether or not he burned down kitchens. And that mean boy was the one who stood on the doorstep, watching Grandpa Smedry waving eagerly for him to follow. Now, perhaps I'll admit that I felt just a little bit of longing. A wishfulness, you might say. Getting a package that claimed to be from my parents had made me remember days long ago, before I realized how foolish I was being, when I had yearned to know my real parents, days when I had longed to find someone who had to love me, if only because they were related to me. Fortunately, I had outgrown those feelings. When my moment of weakness passed, I locked the old man outside and went to the kitchen to get some breakfast. That, however, is when someone drew a gun on me. I'd like to take this opportunity to point out something important. Should a strange old man of questionable sanity show up at your door, suggesting that he is your grandfather and that you should accompany him upon some quest of mystical import, you should flatly refuse him. Don't take his candy, either. Unfortunately, as you will soon see, I was quickly forced to break this rule. Please don't hold it against me. It was done under duress. I'm really not used to being shot at.
Alcatraz Smedry?
I jumped. Turning from the half-burned cupboard, a man stood in the doorway behind me, wearing slacks and a button-down shirt. I frowned, realizing that I recognized the symbol on the man's shirt pocket and standard-issue attaché case. He was a foster care caseworker. This was the man that Miss Fletcher had sent to pick me up from the house. I realized that when I'd originally gone chasing the old man up to my room, I'd left the front door open. The caseworker must have come in looking for me while I was upstairs chatting with the lunatic.
Hi. I'll be ready in a bit. Let me have my breakfast first.
You're him, then?
The caseworker adjusted his horn-rimmed glasses.
The Smedry kid?
I nodded.
Good.
The man pulled a gun out of his attaché case and raised it toward me. It had a silencer on the barrel. I froze, shocked. I raised my hands.
Wait! What are you doing?
Thanks for the sands, kid.
The man moved as if to pull the trigger. At that moment, something massive crashed through the wall of my house. Something that looked a lot like the front end of an old Model T Ford. I dodged to the side, and the caseworker stumbled to the ground in the chaos. The man who called himself Grandpa Smedry sat happily in the driver's seat. The old man poked his head out the window.
Lad, might I point out that you have two choices right now? You can get in the car with me, or you can stay here with the man holding a gun.
I stood, dazed.
You really don't have much time to decide.
Now, I'd like to pause here and note that Grandpa Smedry was lying to me. I didn't have only two choices at that point. I had quite a few more than that. True, I could have chosen to stay in the room and get shot. I also could have chosen to get in the car. However, there were lots of other things I could have done. For instance, I could have run around the house flapping my arms and pretending that I was a penguin. The logical choice to make in this situation would have been to call the police on both of those maniacs. Unfortunately, I didn't think of penguins or police, and instead did as Grandpa Smedry said, scrambling over and getting into the car. As I stated at the beginning of the chapter, I really shouldn't have done this. I was soon to learn the dangers involved in following strange old men on quests. I don't want to give away any more of the story, but let me say that my fate at this point took a sharp turn toward altars, sacrifices, and evil librarians. And possibly some sharks. The car backed out of the house, the tires leaving tracks in the lawn. I sat in the front passenger seat, still stunned, looking at the wreckage of the Sheldons' house. Bits of siding were falling off the outside wall, crushing Roy's prized tulips. This was more damage than I'd ever done to any foster home. This time, it wasn't directly my fault, but, well, that didn't change the fact that the kitchen was no longer merely burned, but also had quite a large hole in it. When we turned onto the street in front of the house, I noticed that the caseworker didn't chase after us, but that didn't stop me from watching anxiously until the house disappeared in the distance.
Someone just tried to kill me.
You may find it hard to believe, considering the number of things I'd broken in my life, but this was the first time someone had actually tried to shoot me. It was an unsettling feeling. A little like the way you feel when you have the flu. Maybe there's a connection.
Well, That was exciting!
I was still staring out the window. The street passed outside, a suburban neighborhood distinctive only in that it looked pretty much like every other one in the nation. Calm, two-story houses, green lawns, oak trees, shrubs, flower beds, all carefully maintained.
He tried to kill me.
Not very well. You'll understand eventually, lad, but pulling a gun on a Smedry isn't exactly the smartest thing a man can do. But that's behind us. Now, we have to decide what to do next.
Next?
Of course! We can't just let them have those sands.
Grandpa Smedry raised a hand and pointed at me.
Don't you understand, lad? It's not only your life that's in danger here. This is the fate of an entire world we're juggling. The Free Kingdoms are already losing their war against the librarians. With a tool like the Sands of Rashid, the librarians will have just the edge they need to win. If we don't get those sands back before they're smelted, which will only take a few hours, it could lead to the complete overthrow of the Free Kingdoms. We are civilization's only hope.
I see.
I don't think you do, lad. The lenses smelted from that sand will contain the most powerful oculatory distortions either land has ever seen. Gathering those sands was your father's life work. I can't believe you let the librarians steal them. I'll be honest, lad, I had higher hopes for you. I really expected better. If only I hadn't come so late.
I sat quietly, looking out the windshield. Now, it's time you understood something about me. Despite what the stories like to say about my honor and my foresight, the truth is that I possess neither trait in large amounts. One trait I've always possessed, however, is rashness. Some call it irresponsibility, others call it spontaneity. Either way, I could rightly be called a somewhat reckless boy, not always prone to carefully considering the consequences of my actions. In this case, of course, there was something more behind the decision I made. I had seen some very odd things that day. It occurred to me that if something as crazy as a gunman showing up in my house could happen, perhaps it could be true that this old man was my grandfather. Someone had tried to kill me. My house was in shambles. I was sitting in a 100-year-old car with a madman.
What the heck? This might be fun.
I turned, focusing on the man who claimed to be my grandfather.
I didn't let them steal the sand.
Grandpa Smedry turned to me.
Or, well, I did. But I let them take the sand on purpose, of course. I wanted to follow them and see what they tried to do with it. After all, how else are we going to uncover their dastardly schemes?
Grandpa Smedry paused. Then he smiled. His eyes twinkled knowingly, and I saw for the first time a hint of wisdom in the old man. Grandpa Smedry didn't seem to believe what I had said, but he reached over anyway, clapping me on the arm.
Now that's talking like a Smedry.
Now, I want to make something very clear. I do not believe a word of what you have told me up to this point.
Understood?
I'm only going with you because someone just tried to kill me. You see, I'm a somewhat reckless boy, and I'm not always prone to carefully considering the consequences of my actions.
Ha! A Smedry trait for certain.
In fact, I think that you are a loon, and likely not even my grandfather at all.
Very well then.
I paused as the old car turned a corner. We were leaving the neighborhood behind, turning onto a commercial street. We began to pass convenience stores, service stations, and the occasional fast food restaurant. It was at that point that I realized Grandpa Smedry had taken his hands off the wheel sometime during the conversation, and now sat with his hands in his lap, smiling happily.
Grandpa, the steering wheel!
Drastic drakes! I nearly forgot.
He grabbed the steering wheel as the car turned another corner. Grandpa Smedry proceeded to turn the wheel back and forth, seemingly in random directions, as a child might play with a toy steering wheel. The car didn't respond to his motions, but moved smoothly along the street.
Good eye, lad. We always have to keep up appearances, hey?
Yes. Is the car driving itself, then?
Of course! What good would it be if it didn't? Why, you'd have to concentrate so much that it wouldn't be worth the effort. Might as well walk, I say.
Right.
Those of you from the Free Kingdoms might be familiar with cinematic engines, and can perhaps determine how they could be used to mimic a car. Of course, if you're from the Free Kingdoms, you probably have only a vague idea what a car is in the first place, since you're used to much larger vehicles. It's kind of like a cinematic crawler with wheels instead of legs, though people treat them more like horses. Only, unlike horses, they aren't alive, and when they poop, environmentalists get mad.
So, Where are we going?
There's only one place the librarians would have taken an artifact as powerful as the sands of Rashid. Their local base of operations.
That would be the library?
Where else? The downtown library, to be exact. We'll have to be very careful infiltrating that place.
I've been there before. Last I checked, it wasn't too hard to get in.
We don't have to just get in. We have to infiltrate.
And the difference is?
One requires far more sneaking.
Ah, right then. Are we gonna need any, I don't know, special equipment for this? Or perhaps some more help?
A very wise idea, lad.
The car turned onto a larger street, cars passing on either side. Grandpa Smedry's little black automobile moved along happily in the center lane. Grandpa gave the wheel a few good twists, and we rode in silence. I kept glancing at the steering wheel, trying to sort out exactly what mechanism was controlling the vehicle. In my world, vehicles don't drive themselves, and men like Grandpa Smedry are generally kept in small, padded rooms with lots of crayons. Eventually, partially to keep myself from going mad from frustration, I decided to try conversation again.
So, why do you think that man tried to kill me?
Because the librarians got what they wanted from you, lad. They have the sands, which we all knew would make their way to you eventually. Now that they have your inheritance, you're no longer an asset to them. In fact, you're a threat. They were right to be afraid of your talent.
My talent?
Breaking things. All Smedrys have a talent, my boy. It's part of our lineage.
So, you have one of these talent things?
Of course I do, lad. I'm a Smedry after all.
What is it?
Well, I don't like to brag, but it's quite a powerful talent indeed. You see, I have the ability to arrive late to things.
Ah, of course.
I know. I don't deserve such power, but I try to make good use of it.
You are completely nuts, you know?
Thank you.
The vehicle pulled up to the pumps at a small gas station. I didn't recognize the brand. The sign hanging above the ridiculously high prices simply depicted the image of an upside-down teddy bear. Our doors swung open on their own. Grandpa hopped out of his seat and rushed over to meet the station attendant, who was approaching to fill up the tank. I frowned, still sitting in the car. The attendant was dressed in a pair of dirty overalls and no shirt. He was chewing on the end of a piece of straw, as one might see a farmer doing in old Hushlander movies. And he had on a large straw hat. Grandpa Smedry approached the man with an exaggerated look of nonchalance.
Hello, good sir.
Grandpa Smedry glanced around.
I'd like a fillip, please.
Of course, good sir.
The attendant tipped his hat and accepted a couple of bills from Grandpa Smedry. The attendant approached the car, nodding to me, then took out one of the gasoline hoses and held it up against the side of the car. There was, I noticed, no sign of a gas tank. Grandpa Smedry walked up to the gas station store.
Come, Alcatraz, there isn't time.
Finally, I just shook my head and climbed out of the car. I quickly made my way over to the screen door that Grandpa Smedry went in, pulled open the screen door, threw the door handle over my shoulder as it broke off, then stepped inside after Grandpa Smedry. Another attendant, also with straw in his mouth and a large hat on his head, stood leaning against the counter. The small store consisted of a single stand of snacks and a wall-sized cooler. The cooler was stocked completely with cans of motor oil, though a sign said, "Enjoy a cool, refreshing drink."
Quickly now, quickly!
Grandpa Smedry gestured frantically from the back of the store.
I think I'll have a cool, refreshing drink.
He glanced to either side, then pulled open the cooler door. I froze in place. Now, it's very important to me that you understand that I am not stupid. It's perfectly all right if you end this book convinced that I'm not the hero that some reports claim me to be. However, I'd rather not everyone I meet presume me to be slow-witted. If that were the case, half of them would likely try to sell me insurance. The truth is, however, that even clever people can be taken by surprise so soundly that they are at a loss for words. Or at least, at a loss for words that make sense. The truth is, however, that even clever people can be taken by surprise so soundly that they are at a loss for words. Or, at least, at a loss for words that make sense.
Gak!
You see? Now, before you judge me, place yourself in my position. Let's say that you had watched a crazy old man open up a cooler full of oil cans. You would have undoubtedly expected to see, well, a cooler full of oil cans on the other side. You would not expect to see a room with a large hearth at the center, blazing with a cheery reddish-orange fire. You would not expect to see two men in full armor standing guard on either side of the door. Indeed, you would not expect to see a room instead of a cooler full of oil cans at all. Perhaps you would have said gack too.
Gack!
Would you stop that, boy? There are absolutely no gacks here. Why do you think we keep so much straw around? Now, come on.
Grandpa stepped through the doorway into the room beyond. I approached slowly, then glanced at the other side of the open glass door and saw oil cans cooling in their wall racks. I turned, looking through the doorway. It seemed as if I could see much more than I should have been able to. The two knights standing on either side of such a small doorway should have left no room to walk through. Yet Grandpa Smedry had passed easily. I reached out to one of the knight's breastplates.
Please don't do that.
Oh, sorry.
Still frowning to myself, I stepped into the room. It was a large chamber. Far larger, I decided, than could have possibly fit in the store. I could now see a rug set with throne-like chairs arranged to face the hearth in a homey manner. If your home is a medieval castle. To my left, there was a long, broad table, also set with chairs.
Sing! Sing!
If he breaks into song, I think I might have to strangle myself.
Lord Smedry?
Down the hallway, a huge figure rushed into sight. Okay, I'm going to assume that you've never seen a large Mokian man in sunglasses, a tunic, and tights. I certainly hadn't. The man, apparently named Singh, was a good 6.5 feet tall and had dark hair and dark skin. He looked like he could be from Hawaii or maybe Samoa or Tonga. He had the mass and girth of a linebacker and would have fit right in on the football field. Or at least he would have fit right in if he'd been wearing a football uniform rather than a tunic. A type of garment that I still think looks silly. Bastille has pictures of me wearing one. If you ask her, she'll probably show them to you gleefully. Of course, if you do that, I'll probably have to hunt you down and kill you. Or dress you in a tunic and take pictures of you. I'm still not sure which is worse.
Sing. We need to do a full library infiltration. Now!
A library infiltration?
Yes. Go get your cousin and both of you get into your disguises. I need to gather my lenses.
Singh rushed back the way he had come. Grandpa Smedry walked over to the wall on the other side of the hearth. Not sure what else to do, I followed, watching as Grandpa Smedry knelt beside what appeared to be a large box made entirely of black glass. Grandpa Smedry put his hand on it and closed his eyes. I jumped back, but Grandpa Smedry ignored the broken shards of black glass. He reached into the chest and pulled out a tray wrapped in red velvet. He set this on top of the box, unwrapping the cloth and revealing a small book and about a dozen pairs of spectacles, each with a slightly different tint of glass. Grandpa Smedry pulled open the front of his tuxedo jacket, then began to slip the spectacles into little pouches sewn into the lining of the garment. They hung like the watches on the inside of an illegal street peddler's coat.
Something very strange is going on, isn't it?
Yes, lad.
We're really going to go sneak into a library?
Still arranging the spectacles, Grandpa Smedry nodded.
Only, it's not really a library, but someplace more dangerous.
Oh, it's really a library. What you haven't realized before is that all libraries are far more dangerous than you've always assumed.
And we're going to break into this one. A place filled with people who want to kill me.
Most likely. But what else can we do? We either infiltrate, or we let them make those sands into lenses.
This isn't a joke. This man is actually crazy. Or at least the craziness includes much more than just him.
I stood there for a moment, feeling overwhelmed, thinking about what I had seen.
Well, all right then.
Now, you Hushlanders may think that I took all of these strange experiences quite well. After all, it isn't every day that you get threatened with a gun, then discover a medieval dining room hiding inside the beverage cooler at a local gas station. However, maybe if you'd grown up with the magical ability to break almost anything you touched, then you would have been just as quick to accept unusual circumstances.
Here, lad.
Grandpa Smedry stood and picked up the final pair of spectacles. They were reddish tinted, like the pair Grandpa Smedry was currently wearing.
These are yours. I've been saving them for you.
I don't need glasses.
Ha! You're an oculator, lad. You'll always need glasses.
Can't I wear sunglasses like Sing?
You don't need warrior's lenses, lad. You can access abilities far more potent. Here, take these. They're oculator's lenses.
What are oculators?
We are, my boy. Put them on.
I frowned but took the glasses. I put them on, then glanced around.
Nothing looks different. The room doesn't even look redder.
Of course not. The tints come from the sands they're made of and help us keep the lenses straight. They're not intended to make things look different.
I just thought the glasses would do something.
They do. They show you things that you need to see. It's merely subtle, lad. Wear them for a while, let your eyes get used to them.
All right.
I glanced over as Grandpa Smedry knelt to put the tray back inside the broken box.
What's that book?
Grandpa Smedry looked up.
This?
He picked up the small book, handing it to me. The first page was filled with scribbles, as if made by a child.
The Forgotten Language. We've been trying to decipher it for centuries. Your father worked on that book for a while before you were born. He thought its secrets might lead him to the sands of Rashid.
This isn't a language, it's just a bunch of scribbles.
Well, any language you don't understand would look like scribbles, lad.
The book was filled with completely random circles, zigzags, loop-de-loops, and the like. There were no patterns. Some of the pages only had a couple marks on them. Others were so black with ink that they looked like a child's rendition of a tornado.
No, I don't think so. A language has to make patterns. There's nothing like that in here.
That's the big secret, lad.
Grandpa Smedry took back the book.
Why do you think nobody, despite centuries of trying, has managed to break the code? The Incarna people, the ones who wrote this language, held vast secrets. Unfortunately, nobody can read their records, and the Incarna disappeared many centuries ago.
I wrinkled my brow at the strange comments. Grandpa Smedry stood up, stepping away from the glass box. And suddenly, the shattered front of the box melted and reformed its glassy surface. I stepped back in shock. Then I reached up, suspiciously pulling off my glasses. Yet the box still sat pristine, as if it hadn't been broken in the first place. Grandpa Smedry nodded toward the box.
Restoring glass. Only an oculator can break it. Once he moves too far away, however, it will reform into its previous shape. Makes for wonderful safes. It's even stronger than builder's glass if used right.
I slipped my lenses back on.
Tell me, lad.
Grandpa Smedry laid a hand on my shoulder.
Why did you burn down your foster parents' kitchen?
How did you know about that?
Why, I'm an oculator, of course.
I just frowned.
So why? Why burn it down?
It was an accident.
Was it?
I looked away.
Of course it was an accident. Why would I do something like that on purpose?
Grandpa Smedry was studying me.
You have a talent for breaking things, or so you have said. Yet lighting fire to a set of drapes and ruining a kitchen with smoke doesn't seem like a use of that talent, particularly if you let the fire burn for a while before putting it out. That's not breaking. That seems more like destroying.
I don't destroy.
Why, then?
I shrugged. What was he implying? Did he think I liked messing things up all the time? Did he think I liked being forced to move every few months? It seemed that every time I came to love someone, they decided that my talent was just too much to handle. I felt a stab of loneliness, but shoved it down.
Ah, you won't answer, I see. But I can still wonder, can't I? Why would a boy do such damage to the homes of such kind people? It seems like a perversion of his talent. Yes, indeed.
I said nothing. Grandpa Smedry just smiled at me, then straightened his bow tie and checked his wristwatch.
Garbled greens! We're late! Sing! Quinton!
We're ready, Uncle.
Ah, good. Come, my boy. Let me introduce you to your cousins.
Hushlanders, I'd like to take this opportunity to commend you for listening to this book. I realize the difficulty you must have gone through to obtain it. After all, no librarian is likely to recommend it considering the secrets it exposes about their kind. Actually, my experience has been that people generally don't recommend this kind of book at all. It is far too interesting. Perhaps you have had other kinds of books recommended to you. Perhaps, even, you have been given books by friends, parents, or teachers, then told that these books are the type that you have to read. Those books are invariably described as important, which in my experience pretty much means that they're boring. Words like meaningful and thoughtful are other good clues. If there is a boy in these kinds of books, he will not go on an adventure to fight against librarians, paper monsters, and one-eyed dark oculators. In fact, the lad will not go on an adventure or fight against anything at all. Instead, his dog will die, or in some cases, his mother will die. If it's a really meaningful book, both his dog and his mother will die. Apparently, most writers have something against dogs and mothers. Neither my mother nor my dog dies in this book. I'm rather tired of those types of stories. In my opinion, such fantastical, unrealistic books in which boys live on mountains, families work on farms, or anyone has anything to do with the Great Depression, have a tendency to rot the brain. To combat such silliness, I've written the volume you are now listening to. A solid, true account. Hopefully, it will help anchor you in reality. So, when people try to give you some book with a shiny round award on the cover, be kind and gracious, but tell them that you don't read fantasy, because you prefer stories that are real. Then come back here and continue your research on the cult of evil librarians who secretly rule the world. Grandpa Smedry pointed to Sing.
This is your cousin Sing Sing Smedry. He's a specialist in ancient weapons.
Sing nodded modestly. He had exchanged his tunic for what appeared to be a formal kimono, though he still wore his dark sunglasses. The kimono was of a very rich dark blue silk, and though it fit him quite well, there was something wrong about the entire presentation. More than just the fact that the kimono itself wasn't something an ordinary person in America wore. Sing's chest parted the front of the silk, and the loose garment hung tight about the waist with a large sash tucked beneath his massive stomach.
Nice to meet you, Sing. Sing?
You can just call me Sing.
Ask him what his talent is.
Oh, what's your talent, Sing?
I can trip and fall to the ground.
I blinked.
That's a talent?
It's not as grand as some, I know, but it serves me well.
And the kimono?
I come from a different kingdom than your grandfather. I am from Mokia, while your grandfather and Quentin are from Nalhalla.
Okay, but what difference does that make?
It means I have to wear a different disguise from the rest of you. That way I won't stand out as much. If I look like a foreigner to Americans, people will ignore me.
I paused.
Whatever.
It makes perfect sense. Trust me, we've researched this.
Grandpa Smedry turned and pointed to the other man.
Now, this is your cousin, Quentin Smedry.
Short and wiry, Quentin wore a sharp tuxedo like that of Grandpa Smedry, complete with a red carnation on the lapel. He had dark brown hair, pale skin, and freckles. Like Sing, he looked to be about 30 years old.
Well met, young oculator.
Quentin looked at me from behind dark sunglasses.
And what is your talent?
I can say things that make absolutely no sense whatsoever.
I thought everyone here had that talent.
Free kingdomers never get my jokes.
He's also really sneaky.
Quentin nodded.
Great. So are both of you oculators?
Oh, goodness, no. We're cousins to the Smedry family, not members of the direct line.
Didn't you notice the glasses? They're wearing warrior's lenses, one of the only kinds of lenses that a non-oculator can use.
Yes. Actually, I did notice the glasses. I noticed the tuxedos, too. Is there a reason you dress like that? If we walk around like this, we'll kind of stand out, right?
Maybe the young lord has a point.
Lord?
I had no idea what to make of that. Quentin looked over to my grandfather.
Should we get Alcatraz a disguise too, Lord Smedry?
No. He isn't supposed to wear a suit at his age. At least I don't think.
I'm fine.
The collection of Smedrys nodded. Now, many of you Hushlanders may be scoffing at the disguises used by the Smedry group. Before you pass judgment on them, realize that they were somewhat out of their element. Imagine if you were suddenly thrust into a different culture with very little knowledge of its customs or fashions. Would you know the difference between a Roundsfield tunic and a Larkian tunic? Would you be able to distinguish when to wear a battled and when to wear a Carfu? Would you even know where you wrap a Carflogian wicker strap? No? Well, that's because I just made all of those items up. But you didn't know that, did you? Therefore, my point is proven. All things considered, I think the Smedries did quite well. I've seen other infiltration teams, ones without Grandpa Smedry, who is widely held as the Free Kingdom's foremost expert on American culture and society. The last group that tried an infiltration without him ended up trying to sneak into the Federal Reserve Bank, disguised as potted plants. They got watered.
Are we ready then? My grandson will be leading this infiltration. Our target is the central downtown library.
Singh and Quentin glanced at each other, looking a bit surprised. Grandpa had mentioned a library infiltration to Singh, but apparently the downtown library was not what he'd expected. It made me wonder, once again, what I was getting myself into.
I realize this will be a most ambitious mission, gentlemen, but we have no choice. Our goal is to recover the legendary Sands of Rashid, which the librarians have acquired through some very clever scheming and plotting.
Grandpa Smedry turned, nodding to me.
The sands belong to my grandson, and so he will be the lead oculator on this mission. Once we've reached the initial stacks, we'll split into 2 groups and search for the sands. Gather as much information as you can, and recover the sands at all costs. Any questions?
Quentin raised his hand.
What exactly does this bag of sands do?
We don't actually know. Before this, nobody had ever managed to gather enough of them to smelt a lens. Or at least nobody had managed to do it during our recorded history. There are vague legends, however. The lenses of Rashid are supposed to be very powerful. They will be a great danger to the people of the Free Kingdoms if they are allowed to fall into librarian hands.
After a long, awkward silence, Singh raised a meaty hand.
Does this mean I can bring weapons?
Of course!
Can I bring lots of weapons?
Whatever you deem necessary, Singh. You're the specialist, but go quickly. We're going to be late!
Singh nodded, dashing back down his hallway.
And you, Quentin?
I'm fine. But, my lord, don't you think we should tell Bastille what we're doing?
Jabbering Jordans, no! Absolutely not, I forbid it.
She's not going to be happy.
Nonsense. She enjoys being ignored. It gives her an excuse to be grumpy. Now, since we have to wait for Singh to get his weapons, I'm going to go get something to eat. I was clever enough to pack some...
Graphic audio. A movie in your mind.